A single, blackened sky swallowed the earth as silent shadows spread across its cities. They were here, the ones the outer colonies had whispered of, the Galactic Warlords. They were a nightmare carved from metal and power, each as tall as two men, with cold, gleaming eyes set deep in faces designed to instill fear. These warlords had devoured countless worlds, leaving ash and silence in their wake, and now their gaze had turned to Earth. Humanity, to them, was nothing more than a minor obstacle. A little exercise before the next conquest. The ground trembled as they descended, stepping onto Earth's soil with barely restrained disdain. Armed with weapons so advanced they seemed almost like magic, the warlords moved with the confidence of conquerors. Their ships hovered in the skies, blotting out the sun in thick, looming patterns. Humanity's feeble defenses, cities, weapons, and soldiers fell like sandcastles beneath a wave. At the edge of their invasion path lay an isolated outpost, half buried in a dense forest. Inside, a lone Marine scanned the distorted message coming in on his outdated console. The feed was patchy, but the message was clear enough. Earth was under attack. Silence followed. The Marine sat motionless for a moment, a muscle ticking in his jaw. His hands clenched slowly, instinctively, and he moved to stand. He wasn't part of Earth's military anymore. Hadn't been for years. But old habits died hard. And he hadn't forgotten why he trained, to protect, to serve. He gazed at the tiny outpost, barely a blip in the woods, then looked skyward. The warlords thought they had this world under their control, but they had overlooked one inconvenient truth: humanity wasn't done yet. A low hum in the forest signaled an alien scout sweeping the area. From his outpost, the Marine tracked it on his radar, small and swift, moving methodically. He crouched, watching, calculating its route. He had no high-tech weapons, only his standard-issue rifle and a few surprises he'd picked up in the field. But he knew how to improvise. As the scout closed in, he slipped through the underbrush, silent and unseen, positioning himself along the scout's path. The moment it passed, he leapt out, wrapping an iron arm around its mechanical neck and wrenching it back. In a few swift motions, he disabled its limbs, silencing it. The Marine dragged the battered scout back to his outpost. With deft hands, he pried open its circuits, examining the alien tech. These warlords had been careless, underestimating the people they'd come to dominate. He grinned. That would be their first mistake. Hours passed. The Marine had managed to dissect enough of the scout to understand its communication signals. Soon, he'd be able to tap into their frequencies, listen to their movements. It wasn't much, but it was a start. They thought he was alone, that Earth's scattered defenders were helpless. He planned to prove them wrong. In the forest, the warlords' patrols moved steadily, sweeping the ground for remaining resistance. They were swift, organized, but they lacked finesse. They marched in straight lines, relying too heavily on their tech and brute force. The Marine noted every movement, every blind spot, weaving a map of their flaws in his mind. If he were going to make an impact, he'd have to strike where it counted. Hit them where they didn't expect. By dusk, he was ready. The Marine crouched beside a narrow pass the aliens used for their patrols. He had set up a line of carefully crafted traps, simple, effective, human ingenuity at its best. He waited, rifle raised steady. His heart beat a calm rhythm. He'd been in tougher spots before, but he knew every second counted. In silence, he waited. The first patrol passed through, oblivious. His first trap triggered, setting off a controlled explosion that scattered dust and rock across their formation, blinding the patrol. Within seconds, the Marines sprang from the trees, precise shots taking down the stunned patrol, one by one. His moves were swift, efficient. He retrieved the alien weapons, examining them with a practiced eye, testing their weight, learning their mechanisms. The warlords hadn't expected resistance, and now their weapons would turn against them. As darkness fell, word of the attack spread through the alien ranks. There was confusion, whispers of a lone human who had dismantled an entire patrol without backup or heavy artillery. The Marine returned to his outpost, his face shadowed in quiet satisfaction. He knew the game had changed. Tonight was only the beginning. More scout patrols were sent out, spreading farther, more cautious. But they were unfamiliar with Earth's terrain, stumbling over roots, slowed by the forest's dense canopy. The Marine had an advantage here. These warlords might have conquered 100 worlds, but Earth was not one of them. Not yet. From his outposts, he listened in on their comms, hearing their voices grow sharper, frustration evident. They were not used to such resistance, especially not from one human. He grinned, his eyes narrowing as he pieced together their response patterns. The alien strategy was predictable. Arrogant. They had relied so heavily on their superior tech that they'd forgotten the most dangerous weapon of all, a determined human with nothing left to lose. As he lay hidden in the shadows, watching another patrol file by, the Marine thought of all those the warlords had crushed. His fellow humans scattered across worlds. The lives extinguished in their path. And he knew, with a grim certainty, that he would make them regret underestimating humanity. For every friend, every fallen soldier, and every inch of Earth they had desecrated, he would be the reckoning they had not seen coming. Dawn crept over the horizon, casting a pale light over the trees. The warlords sent a fresh wave of soldiers, armored and armed, scanning the forest with their alien sensors. But it was too late. They were in his territory now. He was ready for them. And so, the lone Marine set his sights on the invaders, his resolve steeling like iron. He knew that, to them, he was nothing more than an annoyance, a minor problem to be solved. But he would show them, one strike at a time, that humanity was not to be underestimated. As long as he stood, Earth would not fall. The Galactic Warlords had crossed paths with the wrong man. The Warlords, towering figures of metal and pride, brushed off the Marine's initial attack as an anomaly, an irritation to be swatted away. But when another patrol failed to report in, their voices began to crackle with an edge of irritation, bleeding into something else, a faint, creeping doubt. Alien comms buzzed with terse orders. For centuries, these warlords had crushed worlds without so much as a scratch. Earth was supposed to be easy. Yet here they were, losing patrols to a single man. Unseen, the Marine watched them shift their tactics, stretching their forces thinner, hunting for him with more sophisticated surveillance drones. Their soldiers moved in tighter formations, more cautious, backs pressed against one another as they crept through the forest. The Marine kept his distance, letting them sweep, observe, and overextend. He was learning with every patrol they sent, seeing the gaps in their patterns, noting where they relied too much on technology, too little on instinct. The alien tech, sleek and deadly, came with its own vulnerabilities. The Marine had salvaged a few pieces from the scouts he'd dismantled and taken them back to his makeshift bunker, a hollowed-out space where he had set up his command post. He sat by a dim light, studying the alien rifles, learning their weight, their strange firing mechanisms, their energy cores, while piecing together how they communicated. His fingers traced the sleek curves of the weapons, carefully dismantling and reassembling them. By dawn, he'd unlocked a way to hijack their signals, allowing him to intercept brief transmissions and, with a little ingenuity, even send out false reports. As he listened to their reports, frustration crackled through the comms. The warlords considered themselves gods, invincible on every world they touched. They couldn't understand how one soldier, a relic from a primitive planet, was outsmarting them. He heard one officer bark commands to fortify positions, to flush out the human pest. His lips twisted in a grim smile. They were starting to get nervous. The Marine planned his next strike carefully, selecting a narrow valley where the trees pressed close, casting deep shadows. He lay hidden, motionless, while a heavily armored unit moved through the pass, their exoskeletons gleaming in the dim light. His finger hovered over the trigger, his heartbeat steady. One by one, they passed, their footsteps heavy, unwary. He watched them march into his trap, then detonated a carefully hidden explosive, sending a rock slide crashing down, sealing the unit in. The surviving aliens staggered, disoriented, shouting to one another. He fired swiftly, taking out their commander, a massive, imposing figure at the front of the line. Chaos erupted. Without their leader, the soldiers fumbled, barking confused orders in their strange, guttural tongue. The Marine knew this was his opening. Moving through the dust and shadows, he picked them off with precision, using the cover of debris to stay hidden between shots. When the last alien fell, he examined the wreckage. Among the rubble, he found a data module clutched in the commander's hand, likely loaded with intel, troop movements, and strategic plans. It was a goldmine. Quickly, he pocketed the device and retreated, slipping back into the shadows just as reinforcements approached. The warlords would find only the bodies of their elite soldiers and the faint traces of the lone human ghost who'd taken them down. Back at his outpost, the Marine plugged the data module into his console, overriding the encryption with a jury-rig setup. Information flowed across the screen: maps, coordinates, tactical outlines. He studied them, his gaze narrowing as he recognized familiar terrains. They had underestimated him, left their plans half-encrypted, assuming no human could break their code. With each new screen, he pieced together their strategy, spotting gaps, vulnerabilities they hadn't even considered. They were organized, powerful, yes, but they were also overconfident, relying on overwhelming force rather than careful tactics. Using the intel, he began setting up a series of ambushes along their supply routes. The alien warlords hadn't adapted yet to human unpredictability, their high-tech sensors overlooking simple traps crafted from Earth's resources. A tripwire here, a makeshift EMP there, each trap was set to exploit their complacency, luring them into ambushes where their tech would falter, leaving them exposed and vulnerable. One night, he intercepted a particularly interesting transmission. A high-ranking alien commander, frustrated with the losses, ordered a bounty on the Marine, offering rewards for any soldier who could capture or kill him. His face hardened. To them, he was nothing but prey, a trophy to be hunted. He decided it was time to send a message of his own. The next morning, the Marine hacked into their comms, broadcasting his voice across their channels. His tone was calm, unyielding. "You've taken worlds, crushed millions. But Earth isn't yours yet. You came here thinking you'd find sheep. You found something else. I'm waiting for you." He cut the transmission, leaving a heavy silence in his wake. The alien soldiers stared at one another, the message rippling through their ranks, unsettling even the hardened veterans among them. They had never heard a human speak with such certainty, such defiance. Rattled, the warlords increased their patrols, sending more drones, heavier armor, yet each time they moved, he was a step ahead. They had numbers, weapons, machines; he had knowledge, terrain, and the fierce determination of someone with nothing left to lose. In their arrogance, they had brought their advanced technology to Earth, assuming that brute force alone would win. But they hadn't counted on a soldier who could adapt to anything, who would turn their own power against them. He struck again and again, each ambush calculated to cause maximum confusion. Alien soldiers staggered through smoke-filled forests, blinded, disoriented. He would strike from the shadows, silent and deadly, taking out their officers, leaving the soldiers leaderless and panicked. The forest echoed with the sounds of battle, but the Marine remained unseen, a ghost in the trees, untouchable. As the alien warlords regrouped, the Marine knew they were beginning to feel fear. He saw it in their formations, in the cautious way they moved, the wary glances they exchanged. Each victory, each ambush, chipped away at their confidence, eroding the wall of superiority they'd wrapped themselves in. He knew their pride would be their downfall. They had walked into his world, and now he would make them regret it. The warlords had begun this invasion with the certainty of conquerors, but the longer they fought this single, relentless human, the more they realized they were facing something they hadn't encountered before. A foe who would not yield, would not break, no matter the odds. And as the Marine watched the alien forces grow tighter, more cautious, he knew he was winning, piece by piece. They might have the numbers, the technology, but here on Earth, the human spirit would prove stronger than any machine. The alien commanders, once relaxed in their metal citadels, now paced restlessly, their confidence shattered by the losses piling up. Reports streamed in of downed patrols, missing scouts, and entire units rendered silent in the dense forest. Fear crackled through the ranks, their once assured voices tight with confusion. To the Marine, listening from his concealed bunker. It was the sound of desperation. He could hear it in the alien comms, the cracks of panic widening into full-blown fractures. Earth was not like the other worlds they'd crushed beneath their boots. Here, they faced a force they couldn't understand, a lone human fighting like he had nothing left to lose. The Warlords regrouped, mobilizing specialized forces they'd kept in reserve, elite trackers, cloak scouts, and armored drones designed to sweep and clear. They fanned out, spreading their net wider, trying to close in on the elusive ghost that haunted their ranks. They wanted him cornered, trapped, forced into a direct confrontation where they could finally overwhelm him. But he saw through their strategy, predicting their moves before they even made them. He set his sights on the tracker unit first, an advanced squad outfitted with heat sensors and cloaking tech that made them nearly invisible. They moved silently, cautious but steady, covering every inch of ground. The Marine crouched low, watching them pass, feeling the hum of their cloaking devices ripple through the air. He'd already set up a series of low-tech decoys, human-shaped figures scattered through the forest, each rigged to emit faint heat signatures. The trackers paused as they passed one of these decoys, confused, and one reached out to touch it. With a swift, controlled motion, he triggered a nearby trap, sending a shower of spikes crashing down from above. The tracker dropped, the others startled, breaking their formation just long enough for him to strike. He fired in quick succession, taking down two more before slipping back into the shadows, his presence felt but unseen. The few remaining trackers, disoriented and fearful, fled, reporting in with strained voices, shaken by the realization that he could anticipate their every move. When word of the tracker squad's failure reached the commanders, they sent in another team. This time, it was a heavier squad, soldiers clad in reinforced armor with drones hovering at their sides, scanning every inch of the forest floor. The Marine stayed still, waiting as the drones approached, calculating his next move. They swept closer, their sensors lighting up as they detected the traces of his last ambush site, finding broken pieces of alien tech scattered among the trees. It was the lure he'd prepared for them, a calculated bait to draw them into a narrow ravine where he'd set a new trap. As they advanced, the Marine released a cloud of thick smoke, a low-tech trick designed to confuse their sensors and force them into close quarters. Blinded and disoriented, the soldiers stumbled through the smoke, their drones whirring wildly as they tried to recalibrate. He moved swiftly among them, picking them off one by one, using the terrain to his advantage. When the smoke cleared, only he remained, his breath steady, his resolve even stronger. The Warlords were rattled, their pride giving way to raw anger. They had underestimated him, underestimated humanity. The alien commander, an imposing figure cloaked in gleaming metal, demanded action, his orders resonating across the field. They would deploy a final measure, an elite unit with weapons capable of razing the forest, a scorched earth tactic that would leave nothing standing, not even their own fallen. They didn't care about the planet's resources now. They wanted only to erase the thorn in their side, to end the human who had outwitted them at every turn. But the Marine was ready. He had anticipated their desperation, knowing they would choose brute force over strategy. He lured them into the depths of the forest, guiding them through a series of false trails marked with traces of his presence, drawing them deeper and deeper into a trap they couldn't see. The elite soldiers, bristling with high-powered weapons, crashed through the trees, leaving scorched earth in their wake, firing blindly at shadows and echoes. He had set up explosives along their path, each carefully hidden beneath layers of foliage and debris, triggered to go off in sequence, one after another. As the unit advanced, the first explosive detonated, sending a wave of shock through their ranks. Panic set in as they realized they were surrounded by invisible dangers. The Marine activated another series of charges, guiding them toward a final destination, a small clearing where he stood, waiting, weapon in hand. When the remaining soldiers reached him, they hesitated, their confidence finally shattered, eyes wide as they took in the figure before them. Here was a lone human, standing against their might, unyielding, his face hard and unbroken. For a moment they faltered, seeing in him something they couldn't comprehend, a defiance that ran deeper than armor, a spirit that couldn't be crushed. The Marine fired, his shots precise, taking down the soldiers in rapid succession, his every movement a testament to skill and determination. He fought with the strength of someone fighting for his world, his people, his very existence. And as he took down the last of them, the battlefield fell silent, the once mighty warlords now reduced to silence and smoke. His message was clear. Earth was not theirs for the taking. They could bring their machines, their weapons, their arrogance, but they couldn't break humanity. They had entered his territory, and they would leave it shattered, broken, and defeated. He turned, his gaze steady, knowing that he had only just begun to show them what humanity was capable of. The night was thick and silent, broken only by the hum of alien machines hovering across the forest, their searchlights scanning every shadow. The Marine watched from a ridge cloaked in darkness. The warlords had reached a new level of desperation, broadcasting a message across all human frequencies: surrender, and Earth would be spared. Resistance, and Earth would burn. The Marine felt a surge of anger rise within him. He knew what the promise meant. Spared was a lie, a trick to secure obedience. He'd seen it before on the outer colonies, planets stripped of resources, inhabitants enslaved under alien rule. Earth was to be no different, and he wouldn't let them turn it into another husk of a world. So, he prepared his next move, determined to show these warlords what true defiance looked like. He slipped through the trees, silent and swift, making his way toward their main supply camp. He tracked it for days, watching their patterns, counting their shifts. They believed it was impenetrable, nestled within a rocky ravine, protected by a wall of armored guards and rotating patrols. But the Marine had found a way in, a narrow crevice hidden among the rocks, leading straight into the heart of their operation. The warlords had left it unguarded, their arrogance once again blinding them to possibility. As he slid into the camp, he moved with deadly purpose, planting explosives on key points. The aliens, tired and irritated, muttered in their guttural language, complaining about the endless search for one single human. The Marine felt a grim satisfaction listening to their frustration. He could see it now, their metal-clad shoulders slumped, eyes shifting nervously as they realized they were losing control. He finished setting his charges and slipped out, climbing the ridge just as dawn broke across the sky. With a single press of his detonator, the camp erupted in a series of deafening explosions. The ground shook, fire blossomed, and the entire ravine lit up as supply caches ignited, setting off secondary explosions that sent shockwaves through the valley. Alien soldiers screamed, running in every direction, some clutching their injured, others firing wildly into the smoke, hoping to hit the ghost haunting them. From his vantage point, the Marine watched as chaos unfolded, his mouth set in a hard line. He'd taken out their supplies, crippling their logistics. It would take them days to recover, and by then, he would strike again. The alien commanders were in a frenzy, issuing frantic orders over the comms, demanding the Marine be found and eliminated. But the more they tightened their grip, the more he slipped through their fingers. They deployed larger squads, more drones, flooding the forest with patrols. But he was always one step ahead, anticipating their movements, leaving false trails, setting up ambushes. He picked them off, one by one, thinning their ranks, draining their morale. Each alien he took down was a reminder that Earth would not submit. The warlords, desperate to regain control, activated a last-ditch strategy, a massive broadcast directed to Earth's remaining civilian population. Images of their warships filled the skies, flanked by rows of alien soldiers as they issued their final threat. If the Marine did not surrender himself, they would decimate an entire human city to demonstrate their power. The Marine listened to the broadcast from his hidden bunker, his jaw clenched tight. They wanted to turn him into a scapegoat, to twist his defiance into fear. He could feel their desperation in the hollow threat, a final attempt to bend Earth's will to their own. But he knew that if he surrendered, if he gave them what they wanted, humanity would fall just as swiftly. They needed to see that he would not yield, that Earth would not be cowed. So he did what the warlords least expected. Using the alien tech he'd salvaged, he hacked into their broadcasts, his voice cutting through their transmission. "You threaten Earth with fire and fear, but I am still here," he said, his tone calm, unyielding. You may destroy our cities, but you will never break our spirit. You may take our land, but you will never take our hearts. If you want to silence me, then come and find me. But know this, you will not leave this planet unscathed." For a moment, there was only silence. The alien soldiers watching the broadcast stared at their screens, eyes widening in shock. They had never heard a human speak with such defiance, such unshakable resolve. The Marine had turned their threat against them, planting seeds of doubt within the ranks of the invaders. He was no longer just a soldier. He was a symbol, a rallying point, the embodiment of Earth's resistance. The Warlords responded with fury. They unleashed a relentless barrage of firepower, razing entire sections of the forest, trying to flush him out. But the Marine moved like a shadow, slipping through the wreckage, his every step calculated, every move precise. He continued his ambushes, dismantling their forces piece by piece, each attack more devastating than the last. Soon, the Warlords began to realize that they were not simply facing a human with weapons, but a tactical mind, a relentless force of will. Their ranks thinned, their resources dwindled, and their morale plummeted. Whispers spread among the soldiers, rumors of a human who couldn't be killed, a soldier who had become one with the land itself, an unbreakable force that defied all odds. In one final act of defiance, the Marine hacked into their comms once more, broadcasting a simple message to every alien within range. "This is Earth. It's not yours. And as long as one of us stands, it never will be." His words echoed across the forest, carrying with them a weight that no weapon could match. The alien soldiers, once proud and unyielding, now looked over their shoulders, glancing into the shadows, waiting for the next strike, dreading the face of the human they couldn't defeat. The Marine knew he'd changed the tide. He had become more than a soldier, more than an obstacle. He had become the heart of humanity's defiance, a living reminder that no matter how advanced their weapons, no matter how mighty their fleet, the Warlords had met their match. And in that forest, under the shadow of their own burning failure, they began to understand the truth. Earth would not fall. The sky was dark with smoke and the scent of scorched earth lingered as the Marine crouched in the shadows, listening. All around him, the alien comms crackled with tense voices, fear threading through their words. The Warlords had once thought of Earth as a minor conquest, a simple addition to their empire. Now, their focus had narrowed to one thing: him. They had sent squads, drones, entire armored units, all crushed under the relentless precision of his ambushes. Every trap he set, every strike he made, further eroded their confidence. He was no longer simply a man in their eyes, he was a force they couldn't escape. The Warlords now spoke of him in hushed tones, not as a human soldier but as a relentless predator, a legend creeping through the ruins of their failed conquest. Through a pair of stolen binoculars, he spotted their main command post, a sprawling fortress of metal, bristling with weaponry, nestled in a wide clearing they'd burned into the forest. Towers stretched high, and heavy artillery lined the perimeter, each barrel trained on the shadows, waiting for a ghost they couldn't see. The Marines' eyes narrowed. This was the heart of their invasion, the command center from which every order flowed. He had known all along it would come to this. As night fell, he moved like a shadow, slipping between trees and rocks, his approach silent, invisible. He mapped their defenses in his mind, studying the rhythm of patrols, the sweep of searchlights. He wasn't intimidated. He had faced worse odds before, and he'd come too far to back down. He adjusted the strap on his rifle, steadying his breathing. This was it. The final strike. He infiltrated the outer perimeter, slipping past guards who barely had time to realize he was there before he eliminated them with silent, precise strikes. Each step took him closer to the central tower, closer to the alien commanders who had brought war to his world. Every weapon, every explosive, every ounce of his focus was ready, honed for this moment. He climbed the tower's scaffolding, evading guards as he moved. From the shadows, he saw them, the commanders, clad in heavy, gleaming armor, standing around a holographic map of Earth, voices raised in frustration. They had no answer for him, no strategy that could catch the human who had undone their carefully laid plans. They spoke of him as a ghost, an unstoppable force, a nightmare they couldn't wake up from. And as he watched them, a quiet satisfaction settled over him. They were afraid. Finally, they knew the fear they had instilled in so many others. The Marine moved quickly, planting charges along the support beams and at critical points across the structure. He moved with purpose, each placement calculated to bring the tower down in one controlled explosion. When he set the last charge, he paused, looking back at the commanders, who still hadn't noticed him. He took one last look at the heart of their invasion, then slipped out the way he came, retreating into the shadows with a calm, steady pace. He waited just beyond the perimeter, a detonator in his hand, his gaze steady on the command tower. His thumb hovered over the button, and for a brief second, he thought of everything they'd taken, the lives, the cities, the futures cut short by their greed. This wasn't just for Earth, it was for every world they'd claimed, every people they'd broken. He pressed the button. The night erupted in a blinding flash as the charges detonated, a series of sharp explosions cascading through the command tower. The structure groaned, then buckled, collapsing in on itself in a storm of fire and metal. The ground shook beneath him, and for a moment, all he could hear was the roar of destruction, the final death rattle of their invasion. The warlords' cries filled the air, sharp, panicked, as the fire consumed their heart. He watched as the flames lit up the night, spreading through the fortress, devouring everything in their path. Alien soldiers scattered, running in every direction, leaderless and terrified. They had come as conquerors, but now they fled like prey. His message had been sent, loud and clear: Earth would not bow. Earth would not break. In the days that followed, the alien forces, fractured and scattered, abandoned their positions, retreating in disarray. The once proud war machines, gleaming beacons of alien power, lay abandoned, stripped for parts, gutted by the very people they had sought to enslave. Humanity rallied, reclaiming cities and towns, pushing the invaders back, their spirits reignited by the lone Marine's unbreakable stand. The Marine himself faded into the background, watching from the shadows as people began to rebuild, reclaiming what had been lost. He felt no need for recognition, no desire for accolades. He had done what he'd come to do, shown the warlords that Earth was not theirs for the taking. The forest where he'd fought so fiercely became his home again, a silent reminder of the fight he'd waged, of the alien forces that had met their match. Word of him spread, stories whispered around fires, told with awe and reverence. They called him the Ghost of Earth, the man who had faced the warlords and turned their own power against them. In distant worlds, whispers of the lone Marine spread, a warning to any who thought of Earth as an easy conquest. For he had proven, once and for all, that humanity was more than they'd ever imagined, unyielding, indomitable, and fiercely free. And as he walked the quiet paths of the forest, he knew his message would live on, echoing across the stars, a promise to any who dared test Earth again.